I'm a 32-year-old woman, and this story starts on Thanksgiving, because of course it does. My fiancé Corbin, who's 35, and I were invited to what my mother called a small family dinner. That was the exact wording she used in her text. No mention of guests, no hint of a social gathering. Just us, my mother, and maybe her fiancé Paul, who I hadn't met yet. We got there at exactly 6 p.m., a bottle of wine in hand. Corbin even wore the blazer I love on him. The house was spotless, lights glowing warm through the big windows, and parked along the street were about 15 cars. That's when I knew I'd been set up. Inside, I counted no less than 30 people milling around with drinks, country club friends, real estate associates, and the kind of people who wear pearl earrings to casual gatherings. My mother spotted us from across the living room. She swept over with that high-pitched voice she uses when she's trying to sound warm. And here they are, she said. Everyone, this is Corbin, Harper's boyfriend. She's still figuring things out, but she snagged herself a good one. It took everything in me not to turn around and leave, but Corbin squeezed my hand and we moved deeper into the party. She started introducing us to everyone. This is Harper. She's doing some sort of creative thing, right, sweetie? Like design? Digital something? She'd met Corbin before, but she reintroduced him like she was doing me a favor by showcasing my stability accessory. As the evening unfolded, she kept up the routine. Subtle digs in front of every new person. Harper's always been the artistic type, she said to a man who ran a hedge fund. Never quite the academic, but she has her charm. At one point, while standing by the cheese board, she told someone, graphic design is more of a passion project than a career, don't you think? Corbin stepped in, calmly mentioning that my agency had just finished a campaign for a luxury brand, and she actually laughed, loud enough for people nearby to turn and look. That's cute, she said. She's always been imaginative. I felt my jaw clench, but I stayed silent. I didn't want to ruin Corbin's night. But then came the toast. She stood up, wine glass raised, clinking it loudly with a spoon. The room quieted. To Harper, she said with a bright smile, who's still trying to become something at 32. Never give up, darling. There was laughter. A couple of people even clapped. Corbin immediately reached for my hand under the table, but I pulled away. I got up and walked to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the tile, counting each second like it would keep me from screaming. We left not long after. Corbin drove in silence until we were 2 blocks from our apartment. Then he asked, has it always been like this? I nodded. I told him how this had been my whole life, how my mom used comparison like a parenting method, how nothing I ever did was worth celebrating unless it could be measured, posted, or bragged about, how she compared me to her friends' kids who were lawyers, consultants, orthopedic surgeons. I told him she called my business Photoshop time even after I had clients, employees, invoices, and a commercial lease, that she once asked if I could design a flyer for her friend's Pilates studio and said she'd pay me in gift cards. Back home, I went straight to my closet and pulled out an old hard drive. I plugged it into my laptop and scrolled through the folders until I found it. One labeled stuff I should probably forget. Inside were voicemails, emails, screenshots of texts she sent when I missed a family brunch, journal entries from college. One folder held a video I'd saved from when I was 12, her screaming at me over a B in math while I cried silently behind the camera I'd hidden inside a stack of books on my shelf. I didn't cry while watching it. I didn't feel anything, really, but just something solid forming in my chest like a wall. I realized I'd spent years protecting her reputation. I never shared the way she'd talk to me when no one was around. I made excuses, said she was just intense or had high standards. But that night she toasted my failure in front of strangers, in front of Corbin, in front of people who wouldn't remember my name but would remember her smug smile. So I started saving, not just the old files but the new ones. The email she sent 2 days after the party, saying I'd embarrassed her with my sulking. The voice memo she left me, where she said she didn't raise me to be a dramatic victim. I organized them into folders, labeled by year, categorized. Not for revenge, not yet, but because for once I wanted the truth documented somewhere other than my memory. Because I knew this wouldn't be the last time she tried to tear me down. And next time, I'd be ready. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Corbin forwarded me an image that stopped me mid-scroll. It was a digital copy of a formal invitation, a gold-trimmed, cursive font affair for my mother's engagement party. The invite listed the venue, a private club outside the city, and was addressed from her and Paul, the retired doctor she met at some charity event. My name wasn't on the guest list. Neither was Corbin's. I asked Corbin where he got it from. One of his coworkers had received it through his wife, who's in the same country club circle as my mother. That's how I found out. Not from her. Not even a casual message. Just secondhand news like I was a forgotten relative. I texted her and asked directly. She replied, it's going to be mostly professionals. I didn't think it was your scene. Corbin read the message over my shoulder and didn't even try to hide his disbelief. He told me to go anyway. Not to cause drama, just to show up and make it clear that I wasn't hiding from anyone. Let her deal with who you really are, he said. So I did. The night of the party, I wore a deep red silk dress with a neckline just sharp enough to make a statement and heels that clicked louder than I remembered. My mother always hated red, too bold, too loud, not classy enough for her taste. The valet took my coat and I walked inside like I'd been invited. The entrance opened into a chandelier-lit hall with polished floors and waiters circulating with champagne flutes. People turned to look as I entered. A few I vaguely recognized from past functions. My mother stood near the bar, laughing too loudly at someone's story. She spotted me and her face stiffened before stretching into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She approached quickly. And here's Harper, finally joining us, she announced to the group around her. Then she looped her arm through mine and gently tugged me away, the kind of move that looked affectionate but was anything but. She led me to a corner and started asking if I was planning to make a scene. I told her no, I just came to celebrate. She didn't believe me. She glanced at my dress, her mouth pinching, then excused herself and vanished toward another group. Paul found me before I found him. He walked over with a warm handshake and a genuine smile. You must be Harper, he said. I've heard bits and pieces, but it's good to finally meet you. We started talking about what I did for work. I told him about my agency, the nonprofit campaign I ran for a shelter last year, and some brand work I was proud of. He was actually listening, nodding, asking questions, making thoughtful comments. When I mentioned how I lived on my own since college and had never taken financial help from my family, he raised his eyebrows and said, "That's impressive." I noticed my mother circling nearby, jumping into conversations with anyone we spoke to. She interrupted us twice, once to mention the wine Paul should try, and another time to redirect a question Paul had asked me toward her latest real estate deal. Eventually, Paul politely told her he was asking about my work. She gave a tight smile and floated off again. About 20 minutes later, I caught her watching me from across the room with a look that made it clear I'd overstepped some invisible line. I left the conversation with Paul and slipped into the hallway to grab my coat. She followed me. Once we were alone, she leaned in and hissed, "Are you trying to embarrass me? In front of someone who actually matters?" I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I looked her straight in the face and said, "I matter." She blinked. Once. Like she'd been slapped without warning. I walked past her and was halfway to the elevator when I heard Paul calling my name. He caught up to me, pulled out a pen, and asked if I had a card. I handed him one and smiled. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, like it meant something. That night, after I got home, I checked my inbox before bed. There was a long email from my mother, 4 paragraphs filled with accusations, how I was jealous, how I couldn't stand her being happy, how I was inserting myself into her life because I was bitter and directionless. I didn't reply. I added it to a new folder I had made the week before, labeled with the date entitled Engagement Party. Then I backed it up to my cloud account in an encrypted drive. I added notes about Paul's interest, about the conversations, about her hallway outburst. That was the night I started turning her behavior into a timeline. Not to expose her yet, but to have a record. Because she had always counted on me not keeping score. Not this time. 3 days after the engagement party, my phone rang while I was on a call with a client. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked the message later, I was surprised. It was Paul. He kept it brief. He said he had some questions and asked if I'd be willing to meet for coffee sometime soon. I texted Corbin and told him everything. We agreed to go together. The next afternoon, we met Paul at a quiet cafe tucked away on a residential block near his apartment. He was already seated at a corner table with 2 coffees and looked like he hadn't slept well. His tone wasn't angry, just serious. He got straight to it. He said that after the party, a few people had made passing comments about me, how my mother used to describe me as drifting through life, struggling with jobs, but always needing help. It hadn't seemed like a big deal before. But now, after speaking to me and watching her brush off every question about my work, it didn't sit right with him. He asked, "Is any of what she said about your past true?" I told him no. I worked through college. I paid off every loan myself. I never took a cent from her after I turned 18. I started my agency on freelance gigs and side hustles. No seed money. No help with rent. No hand-me-down car. Nothing. She told him I couldn't hold a job until recently and that I'd relied on her to keep me afloat. That wasn't even close to the truth. Paul leaned back and looked out the window for a second, nodding slowly. He said he didn't know what to believe anymore. I told him I wasn't trying to interfere with his relationship, but if he was planning to marry her, he deserved to know who she really was, without the performance. Corbin added that my mother had made fun of his job too when they first met. She told him that ethical investing was a polite way to avoid real risk and hinted he should find something more traditional if he ever wanted to be taken seriously. Paul didn't look surprised at that part. He said she had told him his kids needed more structure, that his ex-wife had spoiled them. He'd brushed it off at first, thinking she just had strong opinions. But now he was reconsidering the pattern. Then came the question that changed everything. Paul asked if I had any proof, any emails, messages, anything that showed what things were really like growing up. I told him I did. I had a lot, actually, but I wasn't going to send it unless he genuinely wanted to see it. He said he did. After the meeting, Corbin and I went home. I pulled up the secure folder I'd started building, labeled, organized, and backed up. I selected a handful of files. 3 voicemails, one where she berated me for embarrassing her by turning down a favor from one of her clients, one where she mocked my first office space as a glorified storage room, and one where she accused me of dragging down the family name by pursuing a career she didn't understand. I included 2 emails. One from when I'd missed a family brunch because of a last-minute pitch meeting. Her words were sharp, accusing me of being ungrateful and deliberately avoiding real responsibilities. Another was a response to a birthday card I'd sent her one year. She replied with a complaint that the card looked too homemade. Finally, I uploaded a childhood video I'd saved without ever knowing why. It showed me at 12, sitting at the kitchen table, crying quietly as she stood over me, yelling about how a B in math wouldn't get anyone into a decent college. I uploaded everything to a private link, password protected. I sent it to him that evening along with a message, "Only if you're ready." He didn't respond that night, or the next. Corbin kept checking in, but I told him we shouldn't push. Either Paul would watch it, or he wouldn't. On the 3rd day, I logged into the link tracker just to see. He had opened the file, all of them, watched the video twice, listened to the voicemails, opened the emails, reopened the emails. No message came after that. The house was quiet. Corbin was asleep, and I sat in the living room staring at the dim blue light of the screen. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't drama. It was the first time I'd ever handed the truth to someone who might actually believe it. I closed my laptop and let the silence stay. 4 days after I sent Paul the files, I got a call from my cousin Rena, who treats gossip like a second career. She didn't waste time. "Your mom is absolutely spiraling," she said. She called me crying, pacing around her kitchen, said you're trying to destroy her relationship before it even begins. According to Rena, my mother hadn't heard from Paul in 2 days. He had canceled their dinner plans without suggesting another date, which he never used to do. That was all it took for her to go into full panic mode. Instead of calling me directly, she sent a long text. No greeting. Just a wall of words about how I had stooped to new lows, crossed every line, and was messing with people's lives like it's a game. She claimed I was trying to manipulate Paul with edited recordings and fake stories. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the message fully. I just screenshot it, saved it to my folder, and then logged into the tracking system attached to the private link I had sent Paul. He'd opened every file, not just once, some multiple times. He'd spent 3 straight days revisiting them, videos, voicemails, emails. Corbin read the data with me and said we needed to back everything up. We copied every file onto 2 flash drives, one stored at our place and one locked in a drawer at Corbin's office. We added digital timestamps, cross-referenced email metadata, and created a clean document list. We weren't looking for drama, but we weren't going to leave anything to chance either. The next morning, just after 8 a.m., my apartment intercom buzzed. Then again, and again. I ignored it at first, assuming a delivery had gone to the wrong unit, but the buzzing didn't stop. I walked over quietly, looked through the peephole, and saw her. She was standing in the lobby, phone to her ear, pacing like a caged animal. She pressed the call button for my unit 3 more times, then started hitting random numbers on the keypad, trying to reach other tenants. When the super came out to check what was going on, I heard her through the door. She said, "I need to speak to my daughter. She's mentally unstable. This is a family emergency." I didn't open the door. I called building security. They arrived within minutes. One of the guards gently let her out while the other took her name for their records. She yelled the whole way, called me ungrateful, said I was ruining her life, accused me of lying about her to a man who actually loved her. The last thing she said before leaving the building was, "She'll regret this." That evening, Paul emailed me. It was short but sincere. He said he hadn't responded earlier because he needed time to process everything. He thanked me for sending the files and said, "You've opened my eyes to patterns I didn't want to acknowledge. I see her differently now." I didn't reply right away. I just saved the email, printed a hard copy, and added it to the folder. The next day, a Facebook post popped up on my feed. It was my mother. She tagged Paul in a vacation photo from 6 months ago, both of them smiling in front of a beach resort. The caption read, "Some people would rather tear down than build up, but love wins." The post got a few dozen likes and some predictable comments from her friends. "Ignore the haters, you two are amazing. True love always survives negativity." I didn't take the bait, I just took screenshots, including the tag, including the timestamp, everything. A few hours later, Paul's tag was removed from the post. The picture stayed up, but his name disappeared. That told me more than any message could. That same evening, Corbin's sister called him. Apparently, my mother had reached out through an old connection at Corbin's firm. She told the woman I had serious issues and was projecting childhood wounds onto innocent people. The woman didn't buy it and warned Corbin. We flagged the attempt and added the contact name to our document log. The next morning, a neighbor in my building stopped me in the hallway and asked if everything was okay. My mother had buzzed their apartment during her scene in the lobby, told them I was in danger and that they needed to check on me. The neighbor offered to submit a statement if I ever needed one. I thanked her, then walked straight upstairs and called the property manager to formally file a building incident report. The super confirmed that my mother was no longer allowed on the premises without prior approval. They even saved the surveillance footage, just in case. I hadn't heard from Paul since his email, but I didn't need to. Things were shifting, quietly but unmistakably. My mother was unraveling, and I wasn't lifting a finger to help her cover it up. Paul reached out again, this time asking if we could meet for lunch, just the 2 of us. No Corbin, no buffer. He picked a French bistro tucked between 2 boutiques downtown, the kind of place you wouldn't find unless someone told you about it. He was already seated when I arrived, hands folded on the table, not a drink in sight. He looked tired, older, not in a physical way, but like someone who'd been sitting with too much information for too long. Once we ordered, he started talking. He said he had confronted my mother about the recordings. She denied it at first, claimed I had manipulated the audio, said the video was edited, said she was under stress and I had pushed her during her worst moments. He asked about the clip where she screamed at me over a report card, wanted to know if I had staged it. I told him I was 12 in that video and the camera was hidden behind a row of books on my desk. He didn't argue. He said things started to click after that. He told me his daughter from a previous marriage had complained to him about a comment my mother made at brunch. Something about how some people just raise brats and call it parenting. At the time, he dismissed it. Now, he wasn't so sure. He admitted he was rethinking everything, but said he didn't want to publicly humiliate her or cause a scandal. I told him that wasn't what I wanted either. I wasn't trying to get him to call off the wedding. I just wanted him to see the full picture before making permanent decisions. He asked if I would be okay with him speaking to my therapist. I'd mentioned her in passing during our earlier talk, and he said he wanted to understand more about patterns, about emotional conditioning, about how people like my mother shape the stories they tell. I texted my therapist afterward, explained everything, and she agreed to speak with him in a formal capacity. I forwarded him her contact details and left it there. That same night, my mother tried a new angle. She called my aunt, her older sister, and claimed I was spreading lies out of jealousy, that I never recovered from being a disappointment, and that I resented her for having a better life. My aunt called me, clearly confused. She asked if it was true that I had been expelled from college for academic dishonesty. That was a complete lie. I pulled up the PDF of my diploma, took a clean scan, and sent it to my aunt along with my transcript. Graduated with honors. No strikes. No issues. I told her I wasn't asking her to pick a side, just to have the full story. My aunt thanked me and hung up. 2 hours later, she sent a text that read, "You've always carried yourself with grace. I'm sorry I doubted you." I saved that too. By the next morning, the ripple effects were visible. My cousin texted me to say my mother had removed her from a group chat for taking Harper's side. My aunt's name disappeared from my mother's Facebook friend list. Family politics were shifting faster than I expected. Then I got another message from Paul. It was short. "Can we meet again soon? There's something I need to ask you." I replied with a yes, but didn't press for details. That same evening, Corbin came home from work with a story. One of his clients had received an anonymous message suggesting he should be careful working with Corbin because his fiancé had a history of mental instability. The language was almost identical to what my mother had used during her outburst in our apartment building lobby. We checked the headers on the email. It was sent from a new account created that same day. No name. Just vague warnings and phrases clearly pulled from past things my mother had said. Corbin flagged the message to his company's legal department. They recommended documenting everything and advised him to block the sender. We added the email to our timeline and printed a copy for our backup binder. Meanwhile, Paul had gone quiet again. I figured he was gathering information on his end. I didn't push. I'd given him more than enough to work with. And if he still chose to go through with the engagement, that would be his decision. But something about that last message, "There's something I need to ask you," stayed with me. Not long after that, another odd thing happened. A woman named Layla, who I hadn't spoken to in years but who once worked with my mother, sent me a message. It was polite but loaded. She said, "Just wanted you to know, you're not the only one she's tried to rewrite." I asked what she meant, and she told me she'd once been close friends with my mother. I had helped her through her divorce. But when Layla got a promotion my mother had wanted for someone else, my mother spread a rumor that Layla had manipulated her boss. She left the company 2 months later. We set up a call, and that was when things started spiraling for real. Paul asked me to meet him in a quiet park not far from where he lived. I arrived a few minutes early and found him sitting on a bench near the water fountain, holding 2 coffees and a yellow legal pad. He didn't waste time. He opened the pad, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "If I end the engagement and she tries to smear me, would you be willing to testify?" I asked what she'd said. He explained that she'd started hinting she had stories she could share if he embarrassed her. She'd brought up private moments from their vacations, claimed she had photos and text messages that could be taken the wrong way, each air, and said people would believe her because her image was solid. I told him I wouldn't start anything, but if she involved me or tried to ruin him, I'd tell the truth. On record. He nodded and jotted something on the pad. Then he asked how I'd handled her manipulation for so long. I told him I got through it by pretending it didn't hurt as much as it did. He sat there in silence for a while, tapping his pen against the notepad. Then he said he couldn't ignore the signs anymore. It wasn't just about me. He'd started noticing the same control tactics used on him and even his children. He said he'd overheard her correcting his daughter's posture and telling his son that his science fair project was too juvenile for a boy his age. That same week, my mother began ramping things up. She started posting cryptic Facebook statuses every day. One read, "Some people bite the hand that fed them. Some people choke on it." Another said, "There's nothing worse than being surrounded by snakes in your own family." No names, no tags. But the message was clear to anyone who knew the backstory. Then she started cleaning up her profile. She unfriended me, removed Paul's daughter, blocked Corbin. But before everything disappeared, I archived every post and screenshot. I dated each file and added it to our existing folder of evidence. One by one. 2 days later, she crossed a line no one expected. She showed up at Corbin's office without warning, carrying a box of cupcakes from a trendy bakery downtown. She told the front desk assistant she was delivering them as a surprise, and when the assistant asked if Corbin was expecting her, she smiled and said, "I just wanted to check on Harper. She's been acting unstable lately." That comment made it back to Corbin before the frosting even melted. He filed an immediate complaint with building security and sent a formal warning to reception. The building management marked her as a restricted visitor. She would not be allowed in again. That night, Corbin and I sat down and added everything to our timeline. We included a copy of the security report and a statement from the front desk assistant. We even downloaded the building's visitor logs showing the date and time she arrived. I called Paul and told him what happened. He wasn't shocked. He said he had already made his decision. He was postponing the wedding indefinitely. 2 days after that, I got word through my cousin Rena that my mother had found out through a mutual friend, not from Paul himself. She went ballistic. First, she called my aunt and accused her of feeding Harper lies. Then she left me a voicemail. Her voice was shaking with rage. She screamed that I had sabotaged her one chance at happiness, that I was jealous of her life, and that she had bent over backwards for a daughter who was always broken. I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to the entire message. I forwarded it to Corbin's phone, saved a backup, and added it to the vault. That weekend, Corbin and I got out of town. We rented a cabin at a quiet coastal resort. No Wi-Fi, no notifications, just silence, sea air, and time. While Corbin went inside to get towels, I sat on the balcony with a view of the ocean. The waves were slow and steady. Below, people walked their dogs, kids built sandcastles, couples read books on striped beach towels. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. It wasn't over. She wasn't finished. But something had shifted. This wasn't the storm. This was the wind-up. A full week passed after Paul postponed the wedding, and the silence from my mother was unnerving. No cryptic Facebook quotes, no voicemails, no last-minute door buzzers. It felt calculated. Corbin and I stayed alert, waiting for the next move. Then it came in the mail, an ivory envelope with gold foil lining. The return address was hers. Inside was a printed invitation for a small reconciliation dinner. The wording was formal but sugary, the kind of language she only used when she was trying to sound above reproach. There was no apology, just an invitation to move forward with love and understanding. I almost threw it out, but something about the timing bothered me. I sent Paul a short email asking if he knew about it. He replied within the hour. He'd heard about the dinner, but he hadn't agreed to attend. Against every warning bell in my head, I decided to go. Corbin insisted on coming with me. He said if I was walking into whatever this was, I wouldn't do it alone. Her house looked like a magazine cover when we arrived. Candles and glass holders lined the walkway. Jazz music drifted through the open window. Inside, the table was set with silver chargers, crystal glasses, and place cards. My name was spelled correctly, which was a first. She greeted us at the door wearing pearls and a smile that stayed frozen in place. Her voice was sweet, deliberate. She spoke like she was acting in a commercial, offering hugs, complimenting my shoes, calling Corbin such a sharp young man. We walked into the dining room, and that's when I noticed her phone, face down. But the camera lens peeked toward the center of the table. I could see the red recording dot flashing in the reflection of a water glass. I said nothing. I pulled a second phone from my purse, hit record, and placed it right next to hers. Her jaw tightened for a second before she plastered the smile back on. The dinner began like a stage production. She complimented my earrings, asked Corbin about his company's new venture, and brought up Paul, referring to him as a sensitive man who just needed a little space. About 20 minutes in, I leaned forward and asked, "So why did you tell people Paul backed out because of commitment issues?" There was a beat of silence. She blinked, lowered her fork, and said I was twisting things again, making her look like a villain. Corbin spoke up without raising his voice. "You're recording us, and we're recording you. Let's skip the performance." She stood abruptly, picked up both phones, and walked into the kitchen. We heard cabinet doors slam. A few seconds later, the garbage disposal roared to life. We left before dessert. The next morning, Paul called. He told me she'd sent him a heavily edited video clip, just a few minutes of her smiling, pouring wine, and me asking the question about Paul's commitment. The video cut right before she lost her temper. He didn't respond to her. He didn't need to. He said, "I'm not marrying her. Not now. Not ever." He sounded calm. Done. Like someone who had been freed from something he didn't even realize was holding him back. A few days later, I checked her social media. Her engagement announcement had disappeared. No breakup post, no explanation, just a silent vanishing act, like Paul never existed. Mutual friends began removing tagged photos, or her relationship status returned to single. And for the first time in months, she stopped posting entirely. 2 months passed. No messages, no calls, no new chaos. Corbin and I booked a weekend at a secluded cabin upstate. We didn't send out save the dates or hire a photographer. We exchanged vows in front of a lake, under a sky that stayed perfectly still. There were no toasts, no family speeches, no fake smiles, just us, a judge, and a warm breeze. The only thing I took with me that day, besides Corbin, was a truth I hadn't said aloud until then. I didn't need closure from her. I'd given myself the ending, and that was enough.